Welcome to Culture, Worldview, and Origins. This series is on critical thinking skills in science. This is Chapter 7, Western Science, Session Number 1. We're Tim and Holly. If you'd like to communicate with us, you can through the addresses that are on the board behind me. We're starting off by setting the stage of looking at science and how science can be defined or how science can be looked at or thought of. This here is what we've got is a diagram behind me, is a diagram that I have adopted now of looking at science, and that science is answering our questions. Science is a way of generating knowledge, and it's supposed to be reliable knowledge through the scientific method. And so here we have the object that we are studying or looking at, the Earth. Then we have the scientist or the person studying it, and what he sees or what she sees is then passes through the filters, the lenses of that person. And according to Stephen Jay Gould, those lenses are composed of theory, habit, prejudice, and culture, which is all personal biases, influences that are really impossible to filter out of the thinking process. And so what we have here is seeing the world, looking at the world through our lenses, and then coming to conclusions that are personal or biased. And it's a bias that we, like I said before, we cannot filter out. And this is the quote by Stephen Jay Gould, is that first facts do not come to us as objective items seen in the same unambiguous way by all reasonable people. Theory, habit, prejudice, and culture all influence the facts we choose to observe and the way in which we perceive them. So in other words, perception and a perspective has a place in science. We can't separate ourselves from our culture. We can't separate ourselves from our normal experiences and activities and beliefs to do science as a scientist, in that we are people that are run by perspectives. We think by perspectives. We think by viewpoints, by theories, by habits, prejudice, and culture. This is the diagram that I've put together, and just the progression and how things fit together. And it's different than the normal scientific Western diagram because this one includes culture. And so, but I am going to show or show how Western science is a reflection of the Western culture. Number one is culture down below. The culture is what gives the influence. It's in the worldview series, it would be the Weltbild, which is forming the world picture through which we look through the world image. We have the culture, and then from the culture perspective or influence, we go to our source of reliable knowledge. We choose our source of reliable knowledge. Then out of our source of reliable knowledge, we get our basic beliefs, which are not justified beliefs because we haven't applied, we don't have a system yet. We don't have a logic of system to justify them. So these are our basic assumed beliefs, which would be our prejudices, according to Stephen Jay Gould. Then it develops into a system of thought, which we would probably call our philosophy. Then it goes to theory or methods. In Stephen Jay Gould's terminology, it's theory, and theory is meant to be as a way of looking at things. It's a mental grid through which we look at things and interpret the data. So that's theory, and that's equivalent with the methods that we use. The methods that we use, in other words, are governed by our theories and our belief system down below. Then we go up to habits on the side there. Habits are, we don't think about it. It's part of our subconscious that we have adopted a belief system. We've adopted a way of looking at things, and it is automatic. And we're going to get into this a little bit later in a different chapter, but it's on the cognitive thinking system, system 1, system 2 type of thinking, and how it becomes a habit, an automatic habit to us. Then through the habit, we have resources of what our science has to be able to explain things by. And then we come with our conclusions, our values, and our ethics. So this is the house, and this is what we're going to go through in this session, filling in each blank, filling in what the Western cultural perspective chooses to build their house accordingly. Starting at ground zero, in other words, not the house foundation, but below the house is sitting on a lot, or it's sitting on the ground. And so the ground floor is what we call ground zero, which would be the Weltbild in the German concept of world picture, world view, and world model. This is the world picture. It includes the life experiences, the surrounding environment, and cultural tendencies. Now we ask, well, okay, what do cultural tendencies have to do with building a scientific model? Because it's unbiased, it's straight, it's a one-to-one correlation. It's, Western cultural tendencies are, one, to separate reality into two domains. And that would be, one is the natural domain and the supernatural. And it's been divided up by a number of people, Thomas Aquinas, where he says the natural domain is that which is governed by science and scientists. And then you've got supernatural domain, then which is the domain of the clergy, the domain of the church. And so that is a clean separation. And what happens is then we, as science, then we study just the natural domain, and we don't take into consideration the supernatural. But that is Western concept, because a non-Western concept can't comprehend separating the spirit world from the material world, because their world is dominated by the spiritual dimension, whereas our world is dominated by the material dimension. And so that is a cultural tendency. The first one, natural, supernatural. So we, as in working in science, we claim that we can work just within natural world. Because it's a natural world and there's no influences that are divine or supernatural, then we believe that it is a closed system, meaning that we can study it and we can predict it, because there's nothing to intervene to change how the processes operate, such as a miracle. You can't have a miracle in a closed system, so that is what is assumed as Western science, is that we live in a closed system and everything must be explained by natural processes or natural causes. That is, and then those natural causes are continuous and predictable and reliable. Another, number 3, is autonomous. That means that the creation or the cosmos itself is autonomous from any other influence outside. It operates by itself. But that also reflects on us, in that we as creatures are autonomous and we think and we act independently. And that is in contrast to a non-Western concept where the person is not autonomous. The person is dependent. The person is part of community, and the person is subject to the authority above them. So that is why the differences in how they influence even to the scientific field. Autonomous. And number 4 is competitive. The Western world, because we are autonomous, there is no limit to what we can achieve or get to if we apply ourselves to it. And so we are competitive in our nature against others, to climb corporate ladders, to climb just whatever. We are competitive. And that has been, looked at and used as a lens to see the natural world, projecting upon the natural world a competitiveness that we have gotten to where we're at because of competition of the strongest. And that is, and so a cultural tendency projected upon a science model. Now, would a non-Westerner be competitive? And the answer really is no. They're cooperative. They cooperate within the community to raise the whole community together. There's not one that tries to get on top of the other. So they're not competitive. In this model, in the foundation then, those are the underlying sources, the underlying tendencies, cultural tendencies. So now what would be the source of reliable knowledge? What would a Western science be built on? And so we have the four sources that Western science has provided. It could be intuitive knowledge. It can be authoritarian knowledge, logical knowledge, empirical knowledge. Okay, intuitive means something that is kind of subconscious. It is quick. It is something, a gut feeling that this is what I know to be true. So that is the source. Number one, intuitive knowledge. Would science be built on intuitive knowledge? And the answer to that is no, probably not. Number two, authoritarian knowledge, which means it's a knowledge source outside of us. Do we look to a knowledge source outside of us to understand the world around us? And again, that would be no. We do not, in science, do not do that. Number three is logical knowledge. Then do we implement human reason, human logic? And the answer to that is yes, because that is part of the scientific method. Is elaborating on a hypothesis, is a academic, it is a rational process. So one of the sources of reliable knowledge in science would be logical knowledge. But number four is empirical knowledge. And empirical knowledge means knowledge gained through the senses, through the human senses. And again, that is a part of the scientific method, because if things have to be observed, things have to be submitted to testing, things have to be, and so that they have to be considered reliable knowledge, they have to be able to be submitted to a logic. They have to be logically approved, and number two, they have to be empirically observed. So those are the two main sources. For some, logical knowledge is the king, is the number one, and for other, it's the empirical knowledge is the other. And that's been the fight and the tension throughout centuries in philosophy, is between the empiricists and the rationalists. So we have here the story of philosophy, and going back and where did philosophy begin? What's it got to do with science? Well, actually, the word science, scientia, the Latin, is meaning knowledge. It means gaining knowledge, looking for knowledge, dealing with knowledge. And so philosophy had to do as the base of developing science, because philosophy is about knowledge. Philosophy is about the pursuit of wisdom, the love of wisdom. And so here we have the story of philosophy by Brian McGee. And what he documents is and says the first philosophers were making two great breaks with the past simultaneously. In the first place, they were trying to understand the world by the use of their reason, without appealing to religion or revelation or authority or tradition. these are the early Greek philosophers, Ionian philosophers, and their culture at their time was very non-Western because the Western culture hadn't been developed yet. Very non-Western, meaning they were community-driven. They were authority submissive to authorities. They were very respectful, and they were ones that accumulated a wealth of knowledge and information from their family traditions, from their external authorities, their religions, from revelation, from religion. So in other words, at the time of these philosophers, the greatest source of knowledge was revelation. It was authority, external authority. And so when these new philosophers came in, they made a break with the past. They made a change. And what was the change that they did? Well, they said no more appealing to religion or revelation or authority or tradition. It's appealing now to human reason. They changed the source of reliable knowledge. Where do we get reliable knowledge from? It was no longer going to be tradition, no longer going to be authority or revelation or religion. It was going to be through human reason, and that was a huge break from the past. So what we've got here, and what we're doing is we're building the Western model of science. And what we're going over is really the foundation or the founding of Western thinking. And these philosophers were the base, were the impetus, the seed of Western thinking. So what we have is the ground level, ground zero, is Western cultural tendency. And the major one that we're looking at is separating the two domains into natural and supernatural, and then saying that we can study the natural domain and study it as a unit that will always react and act this way, because there can be no supernatural intervention. Supernatural, if you believe in it, is in a different domain. So that is the bottom level, the foundation. On the top, on top of this cultural tendency, then we build the foundation to our thinking, foundation to the house. And what it is our source of reliable knowledge. What is the source of reliable knowledge? It is internal to man, human reason and logical knowledge as the source. Closed system. Okay, so that we're making choices. The first philosophers made a choice. They made a break with the past, and they said no more. They said this is our new foundation. This is our new building. This is where we're going from here. We're no longer using intuition or external authority. We are using human reason, logic, knowledge as our source. And what that means is closed system. Closed system is no more interference, no more blaming or thinking the gods had anything to do with it. So that is our beginning point. And just showing that the beginning point of Western science had a beginning with a break from the past. And it was a definite break from what their culture previously believed. And this is the impetus and the beginning of Western thinking, which then produced Western science as we know it today. Thank you again for watching. We're Tim and Holly Nyquist. If you'd like to communicate with us, the addresses are there on the board. This is session 1, chapter 7, Western science. Thank you again for joining me.